What's up, everybody? Izzy back again with another Q&A today. Hopefully, I can get this loud enough for you. I'm just a little bit under the weather, so bear with me if I'm a little quieter than normal. Today's intro video is a video of Jay Cutler doing 405 incline for 12 reps. And before someone gets mad at me for calling this a close grip bench, it's a narrow grip bench. Whatever. It's strong as hell. And if there's any question as to why Jay Cutler was as big as he was, just watch videos like this. First question of the day is, you're doing a lot of exercises and going to failure. How many sets are you doing per exercise? So this comes from the fact that I posted a picture of my iPhone notes workout log yesterday, and everything that you saw there is what I do. So right now I'm only doing 1 set per exercise. In the past I've done more. In the future I'll probably do more. But right now that's what allows me to progress. And ultimately volume needs are individual. So don't try to read too much into what I do, as it may or may not be appropriate for what you need to do to progress as well. Do you have any tips on incline 45-degree Smith bench setup execution? How low to go? So the higher you touch on your chest, the more flared out your elbows will be, the closer up to your neck, that is. This tends to lead to a better pec stretch. However, the higher you touch, the higher the chances you get of impingement or some sort of discomfort in your shoulders, and or not being able to lower the bar all the way to your chest. Now, lowering it all the way to your chest isn't necessarily super important, but it makes it easy to standardize in the range of motion. So all in all, I'd recommend touching as high as possible while A, still getting full range of motion by touching your chest, and B, having zero discomfort or pain in your shoulders. And as far as execution of any bench press, control the eccentric, explode on the way up. Does seated DB press with slight incline train side delts enough? I feel it mostly in my upper pecs. No DB press trains your side delts heavily. Okay, side delts are they're involved to some degree, but it isn't like primary volume. It's similar to how anytime you do squats, your glutes are getting some work, but it's still a quad exercise. So side delts are involved in DB presses, but they're not the main movement, so the main muscle. So if you want side delts to be the main muscle, you need to do lateral raises. Otherwise, the more upright you are on DB presses, the more delts it will be. What brand, model, style of CPAP mask do you use? My CPAP is the Philips Dream Station, and I use the full face mask and always have, because I sleep with my mouth open. So nasal masks would never have worked for me in the first place. And honestly, I'm not one of these people that's super picky about this. I know some people have such an issue with comfort. I just got something cheap off of Amazon, and that's what I use. I strap it really tight and good to go. So I'm not the best person to ask if you need something very picky in terms of comfort. The consensus on YouTube comments has been that I look like a completely different person. Obviously, I think that's kind of a bit silly. I'm just way heavier and a lot older than last time I was on here. But let me know what you think in the comments. On Instagram, 85% of people said, yes, I look like a different person. Do you log your past movements on Notepad too? I'm trying to figure out a good way to keep a record of things. Yes, I do. And I also have videos going about as far back as a year. I have PRs on Instagram, and I really have a good memory for when I was doing what I was doing. So it's not that hard for me to search my phone or my notes to figure out my PRs on old movements that I'm bringing back in. Do you decrease calorie intake during deload week? No. Sometimes. So what I do is I will bring my calories to maintenance during deloads, which means that if I'm dieting, I will raise my calories to maintenance so that it facilitates better dissipation of fatigue that I accumulated during that training cycle. And if I am massing, gaining weight, putting on size, then I will bring my calories down to maintenance. One, because it serves as a huge break. And if you've ever been massing for months on end, you know that lowering your food is a huge psychological and physical break, even on your digestion and everything. And also because there's no need to be in a surplus gaining fat when you're not training, or training hard, at least. Any exercise that takes a joint through any kind of range of motion, even if it's a partial range of motion, if it's against resistance and you progressively increase that resistance over time, it's going to cause hypertrophy. The issue with the powerlifting versions of squat, bench, and deadlift is that they basically have the opposite goals of hypertrophy training. And that is, you're using the most weight possible, so it's very fatiguing, across generally the smallest range of motion possible, and using as many muscles as possible. Whereas in hypertrophy training, you usually have a target muscle for an exercise that you're trying to take through the longest range of motion possible, and using a technique that really focuses on that particular target muscle and doesn't bring in a ton of other ones. So something like a wide grip arch back bench press is going to limit the stretch on the pecs. It's going to limit the range of motion while increasing the weight. So you can't do as many sets, and you get less hypertrophy stimulus from each set. But overall, a normal medium grip flat back bench press is great. All right, so this is the Mike Israel question, or how long should mesocycles be? So as far as I know, there is no literature directly addressing this question. That is how to determine what is the best mesocycle length. And if you think about it, it doesn't really make sense to propose that there is an optimal mesocycle length. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to say that if someone doesn't need a deload every X amount of weeks, that they aren't training hard. At the end of the day, it doesn't even matter if you're training hard. What matters is the rate of progressive overload. So if you have a substantial rate of progressive overload for 10, 12, 14 straight weeks, why would you increase the volume just to meet some sort of arbitrary cutoff to have someone else's approval of how hard you're training? If you can progressively overload for that long before the signs of needing a deload come up, then do it. There's no reason not to do it. And again, I think I already said this, but if I didn't, just because you're on steroids, that doesn't mean you'll never need to deload again. Come on. If you need to deload, you need to deload. Everyone eventually has to periodize their training. No question, but big thanks for being a voice for turning me on to Cronometer. Was amazingly low on some areas. Yeah, I find that if some people have never tracked micros before, for the first while that they do it, they realize they're extremely low in certain areas, and they have holes in their diet just because they're not in the habit of eating the foods that have those micros. So Cronometer is something I recommend to everybody who puts a lot of effort into their nutrition. You don't have to track there permanently, but doing it for a few months will give you a good idea of what foods have what in them in terms of micros. This next question is totally related, but is it okay to eat pretzels as a main carb source? I don't think a lot of people eat pretzels as a main carb source that are elite athletes, but go ahead and log your diet on Cronometer, see if you're deficient in any micros. If you're not deficient in anything with pretzels as your main carb source, which is super unlikely, you're probably not risking anything too seriously there. If it agrees with your digestion, fine. But again, log in on Cronometer, and I bet you'll find that there are micronutrient deficiencies, and there's probably better carb choices for you, like potatoes, for example. What do you recommend for improving deadlift lockout? I'm focusing on doing trap bar deadlift and hip thrusts. Personally, I didn't get a lot of hip thrusts, and I pushed them pretty hard. Like, I pushed the hip thrust machine up to as much weight as it could hold, like 7 plates aside for sets of 10 plus at one point, and I didn't notice much. The one thing that I did notice huge carryover for, and it's the main exercise that drives my deadlift up guaranteed now, is RDLs. And they don't even necessarily have to be like super strict RDLs, but just enough where you're keeping your back relatively flat and you are keeping your knees from coming forward. Your legs can be super straight if you want to make it more of a hamstring emphasis, but for deadlift assistance, just make it so that your knees don't come forward. Your knees can still be relatively bent. Flattish back, because it helps with the SFR. It helps you recover faster from the exercise. You can do it more often with more volume, therefore grow more muscle, which carries over to your deadlift. But RDLs with a knee bend is probably my favorite conventional deadlift assistance lockout exercise. For my home gym, should I get a pendulum squat or a hack squat? So for a home gym, I'm usually looking for equipment that has multiple potential uses. And on a hack squat machine, you can do hack squats, you can do reverse hack squats, you can do sort of like those good morning style reverse hack squats, and you can definitely do calf raises as well. So that's a lot more options than what you can do on a pendulum squat, which I think you can really just do pendulum on pendulum squat. Should deadlifts be done first on a lower body day, or is it okay to do them later in the session? That totally depends on your individual physique priorities. Personally, I find that doing hamstrings or any hinging movement after fully doing quads is pretty hard to do. That said, there's some advantages to doing deadlifts last in a workout, and that is namely, they make everything else way harder after you do them. So it just going to depend on your individual priorities. Both can work. Which machines are better when they are plate loaded versus cable and vice versa? I don't think you can really generalize like this. It comes down to a machine by machine basis. I would have to be picking individual machines against each other. What I would be comfortable with saying is that a lot of plate loaded machines, especially like anything from Hammer Strength, is going to be heavily short biased, and most cable machines will be even force curves. So they'd be preferable in that respect for me. Sure, man. Just throw in some chicken, some beef, some salmon, some potatoes, some rice, some citrus fruits, some berries, different kinds of leafy greens, and some nuts and seeds, and then blend all of that into something that doesn't make you throw up. Or, just don't be a 5-year-old who needs Flintstone gummies and just eat real food. All right, everybody, kind of a shorter Q&A today. Let me know if you guys prefer that, or if you like the actual 15 to 20 minute long ones, or if it would be better to keep them a little bit tighter at 5 to 10 minutes. Anyway, if you liked it, let me know any questions, and subscribe if you haven't already. Bye-bye.